of our ongoing podcast, Basic Notion of Metaphysics, we'll talk about a given. Now, it might sound strange how the given, something being given, that is a notion of metaphysics. Maybe it would help if we say in Latin datum, or we say in English data, or something that is qualified as, for instance, sense data, which is the basis of the metaphysics of empiricism. Still, it is, I think, I believe at first sight, something rather strange. But I believe that I will demonstrate to you that there is nothing strange about it. At the outset, just I have to answer one question about the nature of this podcast. Somebody asked me, are there any transcripts? Unfortunately, no. These podcasts are not scripted. The only transcript I could make would be listening through them and writing down what I said, or what Mihai said, who also does podcasts lately. When something is written, it comes in two forms: either long essays that are usually split in multiple parts, most usually 2 parts, or miscellanea. Those are short articles that are not always recorded in audio. So these podcasts are purely audio. The reason for this is not only because it's, in my opinion, far better to do these things spontaneously, unscripted, and the other is this is the only way that I can approach some rhythm of putting something at some content on weekly basis. If I would be doing only heavily researched, heavily refined articles and essays, refined to an extent, of course, I'm open to criticism, you would have, on Kali Tribune, you would have mostly monthly, at the best monthly publishing of something. So this is, although these are, I believe that everybody listening will agree with me, these are not just time fillers, but this is the way how you do a kind of lecture. And best lectures are those that are not read from the piece of paper, but the thought flows freely. It's not always easy to pull this off, but it's always quick. So that said, let us continue with our podcast. In the previous iteration, I was talking about inversion of metaphysical notions, and how in modern and postmodern times, where metaphysics is supposedly put out of play together with theology and ontology even, that people have impression that these terms are destroyed. These notions mean nothing anymore. They are just rejected. They are not rejected. They are inverted and they are appropriated. And this is one of the reasons why I'm taking given in a focus, a bit obscure term. Obscure but ever present. Now, I will reference to one essay of mine that also has an audio version. It's called Incommunicable Given. It has, until now, it has only one part. It will be finished in a month or two. The second part of that article, that is in fact devoted to one very specific notion, that is to say, notion of person in Christianity, because notion of person in a proper sense is a Christian notion. I would claim this as something that is quite true. Cannot really be, I think, denied or refuted. Now we'll talk. So I talked about this. I wrote about this notion of given in that article, and that article I also have some analysis of Immanuel Kant's views on this notion. Now here we'll take given in as much as possible general sense. So what is a given? Well, the best thing is, as always, to try to see how we use this term in everyday living. And you'll notice that we don't use it that much. It is really a technical term. And as I said, we can usually hear intellectuals or scientists or whatnot how data of experience is very important in making inferences. This is empiricist view, and it's not only important, it is supposedly basis, although it is not in empiricism, it's something else is basis. This data is understood as given. Immanuel Kant comes to mind here because of two things. First, it is very important for him to use this term because of the inner logic of his system of transcendental philosophy, or better to say propedeutics into transcendental philosophy, what he understood as transcendental, which has very little to do in terms of content with what transcendental originally meant. And the second is that he really explains why he uses it, why it is important. So in Kant, you always have this notion that things that subject perceives are given to subject, and he uses the term. He wants to know, for instance, when he tries to define what it means for something to be transcendental, he would say, in paraphrase, the transcendental is that rule that explains us not how objects are, but how objects are given to a conscious subject. And I'm heavily paraphrasing here. Kant would be more strict with use of terms, but this is more or less the gist of it. So there is always this notion that if there is a subject and there is an object, object is a given. Now the thing that we have to note here, and we rarely do that because we rarely reflect, is who does the giving. And Immanuel Kant was still capable of leaving open the possibility that given is really given by somebody, because after all you can be given something only by somebody, not by something. However, Kant was not able to go that far to say that this is somebody. And he used the word something, and this something he subsumed under the term Ding an sich, the thing in itself. The thing, in the most widest sense of the term, that is to say, something that is not given in experience, but is present to all experience. So in every experience you have of the events or things of this world, or even your own inner life, emotions and such, you're always dealing with appearances, because everything you experience is formed by the forms that you as a subject give it, with time and space, with categories and so on. All those things that were before Kant understood naturally as a real existent things, he just put them into subjectivity. So gave them what he calls transcendental ideality. Transcendental ideality means that if I bang my head on the wall, I'll crush my skull, or maybe I'll break the wall. I'm pretty thick-headed, both mentally and physically. But in the sense of principles, I, as a modification of subjective principle, am one that provides wall with spatial dimensions. They are not qualities of itself in itself. Thing in itself would be a thing that is not qualified by subjective forms of knowledge. And it is... I almost said she. Oh, Mr. Freud, take a note. Thing in itself, on the one hand, on the other hand, transcendental subjectivity, that is subjectivity that is before any individual subjectivity, giving us the objects. Now you might note that this is a metaphoric speech already. I would claim Kant was pretty uneasy about it, because he was religious, but his philosophy was pushing him into atheist and anti-metaphysical direction, and he was a metaphysician. It was contradictory. But as you know, I'm doing a series of videos on Kant, specifically Kant's critique of pure reason, so we'll leave him aside for the moment when we exploited him in such way to clarify a given. Some other people, like empiricists, use given without recourse to anything. Kant was deep enough thinker to know that he cannot just use this term without somehow following the implications of it, whereas empiricists are English philosophers of this of this analytic turn, which are never, I think, moved much further than David Hume and such. They even don't try to reflect on the term they use, and they of course don't believe that anything is given in the way things are, and we cannot really know the essences. They don't have essences of nature or natures, but have only physical properties that are reflected in language and so on. We won't go into that. Now we come to the gist of the matter. What the given means. Given means that everything that is, be it in the visible world, be it in the invisible world, exists in the form of creature. Given is another word to say that world is created, and it tells us a lot about the nature of creation by its implications. Now, obviously, what I'm saying here is that this is a Christian term. That is to say that it comes from Christian understanding. Very similarly as we today still in this quite anti-theistic world of today, we use the word creature in English to say, even to when you want to address some being in horror movie, you call it creature. We in Croatian also use it as stvorenje. This is also a very interesting thing. This is a residuum of our Christian not only heritage but fundaments. That I think some people really maybe irrevocably rejected, but that's the story in itself. But given is even more markant. Now, to say in advance, when I say this is Christian, I mean that Christians, there's a spirit of Christianity, gave it the most clear expression. It was here before Christianity, as all great metaphysical truths, metaphysical, I underline metaphysical, mind you, they were all present already. What was not present was incarnation of Jesus. Something like that was not present in this world. And on that note, just an excurse, as I'm writing an article that is built upon interpretation of some Origen's passages in his polemics with Celsus, his defense of Christianity from pagan, like he calls him Epicurean, but probably low-quality Neoplatonist. He always defends Christianity by trying to show that even Greek myths have similarity with Christianity, and even Eastern, Middle Eastern or Near Eastern myths. Now note that in 19th century attempts to prove that Christ never existed or that Christianity is built on older religion, this argument that Christianity has superficial similarities in symbolism, for instance, of Virgin Mary or Jesus himself, with already existing pagan religion, is used against it. Whereas in antiquity, Christians bragged about this similarity because there was this unity of symbolism that existed, obviously, at the age. And this is blatantly obvious when you read those authors. Very interesting inversion, just a corollary to what we'll say further. So, nothing comes from nothing once there is a something. If it is developed and discovered by man. So when Christians started to develop theology, they already had theology to work with. And this idea of completely rejecting everything that was before Christianity is very anti-Christian in itself. Not only anti-Christian, it is anti-human and anti-God, I would say. I've wrote already about it, and I'm, as I speak now, already writing one more essay, the second part of essay on this subject. But one has to be very careful, because real understanding of world as created, moreover, the world as created from nothing, is where the term given really gets to its own. Because Plotinus also would say, a great Neoplatonist, that world is a given, is a gift of the One, of the Father, of the God, was his pouring out of his beauty and the goodness. So these things are never really completely disjointed. There is a certain intellectual continuity, although you have these great events, as the event of incarnation and resurrection, which are parts of the revelation that are not existent in this pagan context, no matter how refined it was, and they make qualitative jumps. They make the difference, in fact, because difference is never produced by continuity of process, but by a discrete new event. And this idea of such event, of very act of creation as something like that, is strictly Christian. That is to say, God creates God creates being. It's not simply that God creates this or that, and that the world is revealed as a gift, because given implies a gift. There is a very important thing. There is a quality to this given. There is goodness to it, or oneness. It is understood in a transcendental way, because you have to understand the fundamentals of the creature, of the God's acts. You have to understand them in this fulfillment of transcendentality, in their qualitative sense, not simply observe them as something, I don't know, oh, we have a lot of rocks here, this means God created a lot of rocks. No. This is not how it works. There is a being. Being is a first fact that falls on mind. First intellectual factum, datum, first intellectual given, and it is the first real given. As Thomas Aquinas would say, we understand that the world is created not because this or that, but because of being, of all. This is the act of creation understood in the sense that it is still present. It is presenting things to us still, because creation is not to be understood as like somebody unwinded the world and then put his legs, sat down in the chair, put his legs by the fireplace and smoked the pipe. Now, I'm not saying this only for comical effect, but today I'm astonished how people, atheists, these what they call new atheists, mostly adolescents of all ages, and they are so poorly intellectually developed that they cannot grasp real atheism, because real atheism confronts God beyond images, as well as real theology praises God beyond images. Nietzsche was, for instance, such atheist. Even Marx, Freud. This is what atheism is. Whereas these guys imagine God like flying spaghetti monster or bearded guy, because they think that people came to idea of creator from transposing their ideal, I don't know, of their ideal, for instance, of a wise old man, or just making things up in imagination. This indicates to a fact that those people are on the level of prepubescence children intellectually, and I'm not saying this for some dramatic effect. This is, I have to admit that this is kind of children I like to hurt, because you can act like a child, but if you are grown up in a position of academia, for instance, you deserve everything coming to you. But this is their level. Now, originally, the level of atheism has to correspond to the level of religiousness. And when Thomas says something like this fact of being that anticipates and transcends Heidegger to kingdom come, for instance, if you are an atheist of the Heideggerian mold, you have to confront this on the level. I mean, because this is deep, this is closer to truth. Or if you are atheist, you consider this to be closer to inversion of truth, because atheist notion of truth is you have to reject God. And now let us put meat to the bones. So a given comes from a theological understanding of creation that is specifically Christian, and you have this special given of the person, individual person, and you have a given of God. I'll save this for another occasion because I'm writing about it, but I'll say this much. The Christian understanding of creation is such that creation is a celebration, fulfillment, plenitude of multitude that is subsumed, united in one. This is very important to understand, because there were some objections, and rather malicious, I would say, and superficial, for instance, to these medieval scholastics as Aquinas. They are doing some kind of reductionism with the idea of simplicity, for instance, simplicity of God. This is complete bullshit. And I would say more or less malevolence, turning the blind eye on the facts that you discover in texts of those people. Because the more numerous, the more multitude, because multitude is a transcendental, is in something that is created, the more perfect it is. In comparison, for instance, if you have, I don't know how many billion people, then you have to have innumerably more billion angels in the sphere of the invisible world. And if you have, I don't know how many beings in this world, then God is all of them and more. And God's simplicity is this. There's nothing outside him, in a sense. He's present to all, but he is nothing of all those things. It's a very simple thing. And this is the simplicity of God. And this is this oneness, and this is the character of a given, is this abundance. It's very important. Now, as we said at the outset and in our last podcast, this is inverted in modern times, and I'll take one example, and I think I'll regret it that I'm doing this example because it involves some translations. It's Heidegger, for instance. He uses this because Heidegger, in contrast to somebody like, I don't know, Bertrand Russell or some of those guys, or Rudolf Carnap, Heidegger understands the problem. They don't, whereas they don't see the problem, and I would claim with one late Croatian philosopher, Valea Sutlic, that this Anglo-Saxon philosophy, in fact, fell on pre-Kantian position. It is a modern philosophy, mind you, but it is it hasn't absorbed Kant. The way the Kant put the problem he put the problem in the way that is appropriate to modernity, and I would say that they cannot grasp even that. So they are kind of like before Kant. This is something that is you cannot just demonstrate in few sentences, but I just throw it in for further consideration. Heidegger says, "Es gibt Zeit, es gibt Sein." Now, this is, I think, untranslatable in in English, because it is a wordplay that is natural to German language. Es gibt means there is, let's say, there is being, there is time, there is being. Heidegger uses this to demonstrate that neither being nor time are individual beings, and neither they are general beings, but they are something, they are nothing of all. Yet, in a way, they give and they are given. This is what is said in this. And this self-giving of being and time is the main problem of, he would not say philosophy, of his new thinking that is thinking outside of categories of theology, outside of any category. His shamanic invocation of dark, incomprehensible something that is, let's put it in bracket, also nothing. This is one way of inversion. Heidegger he's using a personal language. This as gift is not personal per se, but it implies giving, and he uses very very often the Geschenk des Seins, the gift of being, or Denken is synonym, is very close to Gedanken, to think and to give thanks and so on, and he does it in a insufferably theatrical manner, but ends up being untranslatable. His philosophy ending up being like only German philosophy. You cannot think it out of the German language, and this is the question in itself. This I very often rave against English, but there is another English as being inadequate and not capable of appropriating some nuances of other languages that are used in philosophies like Latin or Greek or German. But there is another extremity of this going into absolute worship of language. Modern philosophy, postmodern philosophy exists only in language. For it, only language is the all reality. What was some time ago in other epochs reality, it's only language in modern and postmodern time. But they fetishize language, and people like Heidegger fetishize, for instance, Greek and German. And I don't think it's something that is justifiable, but that's a story in itself. Get somebody to do interview with me, because these things that I put in these excurses are best explained through conversations. Maybe Micha and I will talk about this. We are setting up podcast together, but we are setting it up for 3 months now. We do everything very slowly. So where was I? Yes. So Heidegger, you see this in Heidegger, when he uses the terms that by rights should be personal, that naturally are personal. This is the inversion. This is when you take the most central, the original principle of something, reject it, and take everything else that comes from principle, but without principle itself. And this happens also in empiricism and in our even daily way of thinking, where we are dealing with givens, but not giving thanks to them for them, because we don't believe in one who gave them. Now you see how this comes about, and this is very important and very interesting, and interesting is a very light word, because these problems are not, it is very important to say, they are not something that is beautiful to think about. They are not something that is interesting to think about. They are crucial for spiritual survival. This does not mean that you have to study philosophy, because who would not be condemned to perdition then, including me? Because unfortunately, I don't do this professionally on university or even in school, but only in my free time. And this is something that you would be very hard pressed to give a lecture like I'm giving now on university. Although there are such universities, there are Catholic universities still that host this kind of thinking, and there are universities, German universities, where you can learn this, and there are German authors you can read that where you will find in the best tradition of scholarship these intuitions I am describing here. You will find in scholarly form. This is not inexistent. I want to stress this. This is not there. It's not true that there is no such thing as this kind of understanding on university, but it's very rare and it's not influential. What is influential is what is opposite of it. These things are crucial because you don't have to study philosophy, because maybe you have underlying understanding of God giving you the world in yourself. And most people I know have this understanding. Most people I know are not good people also. This doesn't mean that they are saints. This doesn't mean that they consciously realize this. But they act as if it is a case. And this is very important, because I noticed that you have parts of the world that are not, where people may be morally better, but they are not acting as if this is fact. They are really post-Christian. And by being post-Christian, this idea of reviving pagan ideas, even what is really good in paganism, like philosophy, you cannot really do that, because it's a long story, but let it suffice for a moment that what was pagan, what is preserved is preserved in Christianity. I would even say that some peoples never maybe accepted really Christianity, but took that paganism and gave it a Christian form, and then just form fell off in Protestantism, or I don't know now with this neo-Catholicism in, for instance, South and Central America. Okay, this is a story in itself. I mean, but this is something that Christianity simply gave this ancient realization, very nuanced explanation, especially in incommunicable given. An incommunicable given is what we call person, or thinking hypostasis, or hypostasis itself in Greek, persona in Latin. There are much nuances in translation, so I'm just putting this for dramatic conclusion. I won't go into explaining the differences, because this is a very important subject. And on this note, we will conclude. Incommunicable given is a subject of our two-part essay, of which the second part is still not written. Stay tuned. It will be written, don't worry about it. But it takes time. Thank you for your attention, and as always, support us. Check out our PayPal page. There is nothing so beautiful as that combination of blue and white of the PayPal homepage. But why not check it out? Thank you for your attention. This was Branko Malić of Culture.